Thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition of Digital Dilemmas. Today we have Caroline Ritter joining us. Caroline is a tech executive with 20 years of experience leading digital transformation across healthcare, Fortune 500 companies, startups, and consulting. She's a hands-on transformation leader with a great deal of healthcare expertise in the background, and today we are going to focus on AI in healthcare.
Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast. Thanks for spending some time with us today, Caroline. I know that we spoke last month, and after our conversation, we could have talked for an hour about AI in healthcare. My first thought was, man, I hope sometimes you don't want to have that conversation off at the show.
Right.
Conveniently, I've been on vacation and I've forgotten so much about it that was a really good thing.
I have that kind of memory too, so it's fine. We could just do it all over again.
Perfect. So for our listeners out there, one of the reasons that we're talking about AI in healthcare this summer is I don't think generally the public understands or is using AI yet for their own healthcare, as well as understanding how it's being implemented in hospitals or at doctors' offices. And I wanted to have a conversation with Caroline about that today. I think you have some experience both professionally and personally that we can chat about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and academically too. So I've completed a doctoral dissertation into the barriers of adoption to AI in healthcare. Interestingly, finished it in 2019. And at the time, the two findings were trust and what they called social influence, meaning if my other doctors that I'm working with are not using it, then I don't feel any pressure to, if my boss doesn't tell me to. So I suspect that one has dissipated now, but I fully think trust is still an issue. And the trust part is twofold. One is, do you trust the system? And the second is, will my patients trust me if I'm using it? And because you're kind of giving agency over to AI from themselves, from their qualifications, their experience, and that they're kind of using AI. So I think trust is probably still a big issue.
When you were doing your research, Caroline, compared to now, or talk about both. Let's talk about the doctors first. Are they using it? Do you see them using it out there yet?
It's funny because even just personally, I go to, if I go to my doctor's appointments, I'm always asking, hey, I've been asking them for years, have you used AI in anything? And I'm definitely seeing transcription being used for sure.
Right.
I see them getting their notes, and even people like doctors I've been going to for a while who were set against it 5 years ago are now like, you know what? When I started to use it, I really noticed how great it was that it remembered things. They had forgotten something to put in the notes afterwards, and then looked at their transcription summary and went, "Oh yeah, I forgot they said that." So transcription for sure that's an easy one. But what's interesting with that one is that the patients also feel like they don't want their conversations recorded, but they're that's happening anyway. And if your doctor's typing notes up from what you're saying, then
wouldn't you want the notes to be as accurate as possible?
Exactly. I think because I happen to be looking at online at different systems that are available for AI transcription for physicians' offices. And I just saw some comments from people saying, like, I would sue my doctor if they use that. And I'm thinking,
really?
That's
wow.
like, that is fear-based. I have to think that is like a fear-based reaction. And that is the same as like someone 20 years ago or 30 years ago saying, I would sue my doctor if they used the internet.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine that's gonna age well, that attitude.
No, and what's interesting too is that I took my daughter to a specialist appointment a couple weeks ago, and I was really frustrated that the specialist, who I'd had to get a cancellation for because they wanted me to get an appointment in April of 26, by the way. So waited for this to get this appointment, that she was just, I felt like she was just shooting in the dark of like asking random questions that she could think of. And I wanted to say to her, can you go on to like Perplexity AI or something and like put in these, because I feel like I'd already done research in using various AI tools. And that was why we were with the rheumatologist, because that's what it sounded like that was related to, So to me, it was frustrating that it's not using AI or a doctor. It's going to a doctor that uses AI and uses it to go, oh, you know what? That's a really good question. That's a good point. Let me go down that avenue. Because you
There you
can't
go.
possibly remember every tiny little thing and have all those decision trees in your head, right?
Yeah, and I think, Caroline, it's that memorization piece of AI
Mm-hmm.
that that we can get rid of, in many facets of our lives and in many jobs. I think there's been this school of thought with doctors or lawyers or professionals, and we've been taught this since we were young, that if we memorized everything,
Mm-hmm.
that meant we were smart.
Right, right.
And
Look at the school system. Yeah. I mean,
right?
my daughter just did her AP exams. So much of it was trying to sit there and remember all of these facts from European history. I mean, when would
Yeah.
you ever need to do that? Like, you would look
That
things up.
yeah. And I
And in a
wanna
week,
write a
you're forgotten, by the way.
Mhm. Well, that's the other thing. They've done studies on retention for that.
Mhm.
When you memorize in that kind of way, you don't retain it.
Not at all. No, no. And I've always been quite good at taking exams because I have a really
Uh-huh.
good short-term memory. But how useful is that? Like, I I can't remember
Right,
everything from our conversation 2 weeks ago or a month ago, but I could study
right.
for a test really well and be able, and in 24 hours, I'll remember everything. But then it dissipates. So having immediate access to a curated version of
Yeah,
that knowledge that's where AI is super, super helpful. And there's
yeah,
been like, when I did my research, I found that for certain specialties, it would take a doctor more than 40 hours a week just to keep up. If they knew everything that there was to know for their specialty, it would take more than 40 hours a week just to keep current. So it's
yeah.
impossible.
And
And so
wouldn't we
if you
rather
wanna trust your doctor, you wanna trust your doctor who stays current and uses that information.
Well,
and wouldn't
that's
we
it really.
rather
Wouldn't you rather have a doctor that was availing him or herself of
Mhm.
all of the tools that are out there today,
Right. Right. Right.
like,
which AI is one.
they're good at understanding what tools to go look up something, they're paying attention to you,
Mhm.
uh, eye-to-eye contact, body language,
Yeah, the stuff that
conversation.
AI can't do,
Right, and
Right,
that was
that
one piece that I really did notice, and the specialty appointment that I went to most recently, where the doctor had started using transcription, is I was having a conversation with her, and she's looking at me, and I felt heard and listened to, versus going like
right.
this and every so often looking across at
Mhm.
me, and then just felt like she's just typing and she's only half listening. Whereas when the transcription's working, they're looking eye to eye, and you feel like, okay, you are listening. And I'm sure they were listening before, but it's
It's
body language
different.
gives you a
Yeah.
different, yeah, gives you a
Yeah,
different.
when I was a kid in the '60s and I went to my pediatrician, my pediatrician, I remember him, he was one of my first heroes. He was this really cool guy, and you'd sit on the table with the paper, and he would just come in and talk to me. We would talk about sports, we would talk about my
Mm,
health, how I'm feeling, and it was like a real person-to-person conversation that made me so comfortable. And
mhm.
then, fast forward 50 years, and now it's what you described. They're doing this, and they're looking over, And I know they're really good, and I know they're really
And they've got
smart, and I
10
know they're doing
minutes.
their best to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They're spending
Yeah.
their time doing this. Like,
Yeah.
no, can you come
Right,
with
right.
so, to your point, Caroline, I had an appointment with a specialist in April, and he's doing the, using AI for note-taking as well, the
Mhm.
transcription, and he came
Yeah.
around from around his desk and sat next to me, and we talked like 2 human beings, and he was curious about my experience since he had seen me last. I
Mhm.
felt like so heard.
Yeah, yeah, for
It was
sure. And then
wonderful, and
add
he loves it
into
too.
that. Yeah, so I mean, add into that their ability to then be able to have even real-time suggestions come up on a screen that
Yeah.
says it's heard the transcription and it's already popping up. Here's three different ways you could take this to know a little bit more about what this prognosis or diagnosis could be. That those could be just little prompts for the doctor that it's already going, "Oh, crap, this could be whatever. How ask this
Yeah.
question." And then it is doing that for you while you're having that conversation. I mean, you hear "human in the loop" is the term that we use a lot in AI, and it's about making sure that the human is the one controlling the tools.
Oh,
And
that's interesting. I haven't
so
heard that expression.
yeah, so you always you don't want, it whether it's healthcare or even, weapons or something, that you wanna make sure that ultimately it's a human gets the information and makes the decision. For these
Yeah.
high risk decisions. Little decisions all day long, when you think about AI agents, those are ones that are actually making decisions and continuing it to kind of actually they make decisions and create next tasks versus, um, when it's something that's really high risk, you need that human in the loop to be the one making the decision. And that AI,
And I
I mean,
think
healthcare is a primary example of where that's needed.
and can we all foresee a few years down the road? Can you imagine going to a doctor, any doctor, whether it's the emergency room, your personal physician, or a specialist, and they're
Mhm.
not using some form of AI like this? I mean, you would probably feel like, "Yeah, maybe I need to find another doctor."
Right, no, that's how I felt with this specialist appointment that I wanted to be like, "Do you need me to bring up some can I help you with this? Because 'Cause you're just
Yeah,
shooting
maybe
in
I'm
the
gonna jump
dark."
on my phone right here, and maybe I
Yeah,
can come up with
right.
some suggestions for
Right,
you.
maybe we can maybe ask the questions and we'll come up with it was already frustrating because had already done that because I waited so long for the appointment. I'd already done a lot of research and said, here are the symptoms, here's what it's been over time, here's what it's," and you've got other things too in terms of, um, IoT where you've got those like my smartwatch and my pedometer, all these different things that you can have as well. So you can add in technology sensors that can, I mean, the story I shared with you, John, was about the fact that I'll share some personal information that because I'm giving my permission that
Mhm.
it's fine. Because I'm a big data privacy nut, by the way. We'll get into that too. But it was my smartwatch that told me to indicate, like, let me know that my heart rate had been increasing for the last 6 weeks. And I was like, "Huh, that's weird. What happened 6 weeks ago?" And it just kept going and going, and I was like, "Hmm." Went and had some tests, did some and then, found myself in the ER, like, a week later, and they're looking at but when I looked at some of these symptoms of what it could be, of course, I was in ChatGPT or whichever your favorite AI
Yep.
is, and it had suggested that it was a thyroid dysfunction. I went to the ER. The ER, everyone was trying to test my heart. My heart rate, I woke up out of a dead sleep, my heart rate was 134. So,
Wow.
being a mom, I drove myself to the hospital and
Mhm.
told my kids to just be like, "Look after each other. You'll be fine." Drove myself to the hospital. And so it got, EKG, all this testing, and I said, "Guys, I know you're not gonna wanna hear this, and believe me, it comes from years of research that I know you're not gonna wanna hear this, but I did a little research on AI, and it thinks that this is a thyroid dysfunction. And so they ran other tests, and it came back. And then 4 endocrinologists showed up in the ER, and they said, "Yeah, your levels are so far off that we can't even measure them." But it was, and by the way, I'm fine now. And it was a weird reaction to something, but but
But if you
it
hadn't
was.
had that ability, the ability
I
to
don't know
volunteer that
whether, 1,
information.
would they have known, or 2, how long would I have been
Right.
sitting there being, I mean, I was already there for hours where, well, they looked through all, had to wait for those tests to come back, whatever, but those are the things where it's really helpful, because I also was able to show them on my phone, look at what my heart rate has been doing for the last 6 weeks. I was able to show them the
Right.
health app that showed it's progressively going up. This is not something that happened in within 24 hours. This has been progressive. So it's
Right.
something that's been impacting me over time. So it's things like that that I think are just immeasurably valuable to patient, and you really start to become partners too, because I felt, once they sort of started thinking, when I was like proving things and going, no, I'm not crazy. Like, I promise you,
Right.
I look at this, look at these results, and I could bring up my blood test results from on my phone and show them that, and show them that, and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, that's actually really, really helpful information. And
Do
so,
you think
yeah.
do you think, from your experience, what you're seeing, because 'cause you're still in the corporate space in a sense,
Mhm.
are pick your favorite healthcare company. Are they encouraging both the doctors and their clients, i.e. the patients, um, to use AI, to use technology
Mhm.
to short circuit some of these lengthy potential,
Yeah.
medical issues that we may have?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, from the patient side, it's things like using generative AI through portals, so you can, on chat bots and that kind of thing, so you can inquire. I mean, that is incredibly helpful. I don't know if you've ever read an explanation of benefits, or your benefits document, even worse, a 100-page thing that comes when you change your
Right.
healthcare. That it's near no one sits and reads that whole thing, and then you wait until, oh, I need physical therapy. Now you're trying to find out, what am I, find the
Yeah.
right page. Whereas chatbots can inquire against a knowledge base in split second and tell you, this is your benefit. You'll get so many, you get 6 visits, and here's your copay and whatever. So you're not having to search through that. So that is really helpful. And probably they can get to that quicker than a customer service person could anyway. If you called,
100%.
it would take
And you're not gonna
longer.
be on the phone waiting for an hour.
Exactly, and you can just do it online. So for sure, that's definitely from a patient perspective. For doctors, there's a couple different things. One, I'm seeing a lot of prior authorization being can be sped up through AI. Again, human in the loop. But what happens is, when you submit for a prior authorization, there's so much data you've got to send with it, that
Mm.
the people receiving that are searching through. They're doing this pattern matching, basically, which is what AI does. So you're pattern matching between, what is the rule, have you satisfied the rule, right? So you're going with, did you give me the documents that match what I know is what needs to be done to satisfy this authorization. And AI can do that for you, and make a recommendation. So it can say, I think this authorization should be approved, and here's why. I found this on page 3, I found this on 76, I found this on, so that it helps the person in charge go back through their caseworker and look at each one of them, go, yep, you're right. Whereas they would have had to look page by page and doing that themselves, so it's just so much quicker. So prior auth for sure that one is happening. And then I think, when we look at, there's a focus now on value-based care. I think there's a huge opportunity there. So value-based care is where health insurance companies contract with providers for outcomes versus just fee for service. So instead of just paying every time you go to the doctor, you pay the same amount, you pay the same copay, and there's no bearing on the outcome. You could just keep going back, right? And instead you
Right.
have a value-based care where I may contract if let's say you specialize in diabetes as a doctor, I could have a patient could be on the books for an insurance company with diabetes, and I will contract with you for a flat amount for a diabetic patient for a year. And so I'm going to give you whatever it is. I have no clue. So I'm going to say $5,000. I'm sure that's less than it should be. But, and then regardless of how many times that patient comes to you, that's all you're going to get. And so it's then the incentives are aligned that the patient wants to be well and you want to keep them well because it will actually bring your costs down because you will get the same amount of money regardless. The patient won't pay extra copays. So what we're trying to do with this value-based care is align incentives. The problem with it is it produces so much more data and analysis that needs to happen because it's so much more complicated, right? I've got to be able to look at what is this condition? What is my expectation? How has this person been? Like, even just from an underwriting perspective, it's complicated. So there's just so much more analysis that needs to go into it. We need AI to do that. But there's a lot of focus now. You'll see that a lot with the big insurance companies or even the small startups too, where we're focusing on these value-based care arrangements.
And they need AI to make that work.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing it without in a lot of cases, but it would just be so much easier
Right.
that to be able to identify and just in terms of analysis to be able to figure out, what's next best action. I mean, something that I was working on 10 years ago where I was working that from a health insurance company perspective was trying to identify people before they had a chronic condition. So looking at their claims, from a medical, like who did you go and see? What was it for? What was your diagnosis code? And what medications did you take? And then thinking, wait a second, we've seen this pattern before. Again, the pattern matching of we've seen this before. Somebody who goes and has these specific appointments, takes this, ends up with this chronic disease a lot of the time. So maybe we can intervene now and call them and say, hey, let's recommend these different interventions that would stop you from getting a chronic issue.
Right. I want to ask you a question. I've been using myself as a test pilot guinea pig, and I'm comparing myself to some of my friends out there. And their concerns probably of getting involved like I am because of data privacy issues. So I want to go down that road a little bit. So
Yeah.
here's my story, and then I'll share what I think some of my friends are not doing. So I've decided to experiment on myself and to use ChatGPT. That's my favorite, the paid version. And I've been entering over the last 6 months my medical history,
Mm-hmm.
so it knows as much about me as any doctor would when I went and filled out 8 pages of documentation.
Yeah.
And then whenever I go to the doctor or I have, however, if I feel poorly or if I feel really well, I go out there and I share that with ChatGPT. And
Mm-hmm.
then, if I had an Apple Watch, I'd be sharing that as well because I want ChatGPT to know as much about me as possible medically.
Yeah.
And my quick story is I have one chronic condition with my GI, and I solved for that through the physician and ChatGPT, but solving for that caused another issue, where I was having vertigo off and on. And I went out to ChatGPT, and it asked me right away, "I know you're on a special diet. Can you share with me what you're actually eating over the last several months?" And I shared it. It then concluded that I was short on some calcium and some
Mm.
magnesium, recommended a supplement, a certain amount. I went on it, boom, within 5 days, all those issues were gone. Now,
Mm-hmm.
my short story. I use it all the time, continually, and it's been really wonderful. But I'm wondering if a lot of people out there are saying, "Oh, I don't want to go out there and share my
Well,
medical history with." Go ahead, Em.
I'll be the example, and I am someone who shares their entire life online. Like I am the definition of no boundaries. But I would be concerned because what happens when an insurance company gets hold of all that data and decides to change my coverage based on what they can see, and just as an example,
Yeah.
like
Sure. Those are
Yeah.
two great examples
or
right there.
I'm looking for a job. What happens if my employer sees it? I
Right.
don't know. Like there are, I can imagine. And if I can imagine, and I'm someone who really, my Facebook page is wide open. I have a blog, like I'm a very open person, and I'm probably under concerned about data privacy. So
Yeah.
if this is occurring to me, I have to imagine it's occurring to other people.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are. I mean, first of all, in some of the tools, you can specifically say, "Don't." You can go into your settings and say, "Don't use my data for training." Like that's one thing that you should always check if you're using a tool. Make sure that's something that you can share. But at the moment, it's a trade-off of,
Yeah.
return on investment to some
Mhm.
degree. You're gonna give up a little bit of privacy. Is it worth it? Like that's the, and regulations are always they're lagging anyway, and they're gonna be even like they're it's gonna be very, very hard for regulations to keep up to the speed of the speed of which AI is evolving. Even in Europe where you had GDPR back in 2018, and now they've added an AI act as well.
Right.
Um, it, it's still it's still it's a balance because there are things that OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, OpenAI has released that they don't release in Europe because of the stricter AI
Right.
regulations. So then it's a trade-off of do you it's really interesting. I can talk about this for hours of the philosophical debate of, what are you willing to give up for what you're
Right.
going to get?
And
And
I'll
that's
tell you, I always say this on this podcast, but um, my kids are John's stepkids who are in their 16 and 18. They have a very different conception of privacy than I do,
Mhm.
and they are willing to trade almost everything for
Mhm.
convenience. Not
Right,
even
right,
not even for, we're talking
right,
about our healthcare, which is
right.
a real benefit, but they're willing to trade their personal data for targeted ads.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
No, for sure.
worth
Yeah.
it to them.
And so I think it will just depend on where some of these regulations go.
Mhm.
I mean, some of the companies that you're talking about, Meta, Amazon, which has Facebook, and then Amazon and Google, of those are the big data mongers, right? They're the ones where where we're giving them everything, right? We're letting them know what we had for dinner. We're letting them know where we are, all of the time. They're getting so much data, but GDPR, like Facebook has been fined over 2 billion euros so far.
Huh.
Um,
Wow.
for data privacy. Amazon over 700 million, Google 100 million. Like because some of these regulations like GDPR are huge, like it's a percentage of revenue. So the bigger the company, the bigger the fine. And which is good
Right.
for most of us, right? And then AI, I think it's 4% of revenue for GDPR, and then the AI Act I think is 7. So it's even more that the percentage of revenue for the potential fines is even higher. But the U.S. is lagging on those. There's a lot of more influence, I think, from technology companies to influence regulatory systems. So and then you rely on the states. So California has CCPA. They had a more recent update that I can't remember the name of, but it's similar types of things to GDPR. But, and the AI Act for Europe involves, they categorize the types of AI. So when you're
Right.
talking about things like your medical data or your financial data or any of those, then it's categorized much higher, and the fines and the regulations are much tighter than what you had for dinner.
Caroline,
So
do you think?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In your experience, do you find that European citizens trust um, sharing information on AI, on an AI large language model because of GDPR and other AI ethical acts that they have, versus Americans where they maybe don't trust
Right.
it because we have no legislation? Do you see any difference in behaviors?
That's a really good question. Now I feel like I've got to go and ask my family
Ah,
and see. My
we'll have to
my
have you on
my
again.
brother and my dad are in England. And I'm going to be in Italy on Friday, so I'll ask people there too. But I think maybe to some degree, but again, it's human nature to kind of be resistant to sharing and be worried
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the
Or it could
impacts.
be used
So
against you.
even if,
Right.
and again, it's like the fact that Meta had these giant fines didn't help the people whose data was sold. Like it,
Right, 'cause that was
they
the
didn't get the
horse is already
money
out of
for
the barn.
one thing. The money
Right.
went to the government, and they didn't get the money unless you go and have a class action lawsuit or something. But their data was already gone. They were already being
Right.
hounded by somebody who bought it on the dark web or whatever, you know? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah, that's a great
I don't
point.
think that they would see the advantages necessarily of the regulation other than it being a deterrent to the companies and having incentivizing them to be behaving better and having better rules.
I think you guys are right, and I think in my situation, it was like, the pros versus cons. I just decided, "You know what? I don't give a shit." It's like, "Go ahead, you can know everything
Yeah.
about me.
Yeah.
I need to solve my issues here, and I'm looking for help." And
Yeah.
calling the
Yeah,
doctor means I'll have an appointment 3 months from now, maybe.
right. So you do a cost
Right.
benefit
Well,
analysis
Yeah,
in terms
exactly.
of what it's worth
yeah,
to you.
Yeah.
And if you start getting calls from pharmaceutical companies that, create drugs to treat your chronic
Yeah.
condition,
Mhm.
you're
Then
willing to put up with that. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
but you're willing to,
like
yeah. Yeah, I mean, with my daughters, um, when we were trying to find something out with her, I took the blood test results and I redacted everything on the top of it on a PDF. So I blocked out all of her personal information and just
uh,
uploaded the result and then said,
oh, they
"What
had
is
the
this?"
data, but they didn't know who.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. So I'm like
yeah, yeah,
saying, "Hey, if you saw this blood test result, what would you think this problem was?" But
right.
but if you're trying to get a very complete picture like you're doing, then that's a little harder.
yeah,
It's
Yeah,
gonna
'cause I'm
guess.
the one having the interest. Right, right,
Yeah,
no, that makes sense.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
get both sides, I understand it, I totally get it.
I
Um,
mean, yeah, the other thing I think that keeps me awake at night is more about AI bias, and I don't know whether you wanted to get into
yes.
that
So
too.
yeah, I do.
yeah,
Go ahead, Amber.
well, AI bias is kind of not my hobby horse, but I don't understand how. To me, it's like the main flaw in AI, because
Mhm.
if if it's learning all of this stuff from humans, humans bring this bias to the
Right,
table, and how do we escape that?
right, yeah. So, and for those that, are not familiar with what we're talking about either, AI it's trained on data, right? It's trained on data that exists, what we would normally in system terms, what we call production data. So it's data that exists around systems, and in there are certain flaws of inaccuracies, but also missing data as well. So one of my passions is around looking at gender bias and other racial inequities and that kind of thing, as to where are we not including data, and that can cause bias. So it's not only inaccuracy, but it's also absence of data. So one example is even with like, only recently have they been using crash test dummies that are female. And there's Dr. Stacy Sims has famously said, women are not small men. So with crash test dummies, they basically just scaled down men and had them, but women anatomically are different. And until then, they'd only ever used some kind of normal size of like 5'8" man who weighs 170 pounds or something like that. That's what they'd like always done that. But then they started, but the problem with that is now, like in the EU, 47% of women, I only have the stats for the EU, 47% of women are more likely to be seriously injured in a car accident, and 17% more likely to die. So how much of that is because of those crash tests? Because we didn't
where they
test
designed the safety of the cars for men.
They're designed to save men. And
Right.
well, it's like the space program in
the which side?
America, the space program, when they had the all-female, and they had to delay it because they didn't have spacesuits that were created for females.
But there's just, I don't know whether it's funny because I live with my 3 daughters. So and we have Google speech recognition. You know, we have the Google Nest. It's probably going to talk to me in a second. And it's constantly not understanding us. Like we're always taught. And then I just found out, I've been reading a book called Invisible Women. And Google speech recognition is 70% more likely to accurately understand male speech than female. 70%. Which makes a lot of sense now that why it doesn't understand the 4 women in my house. And the fact that we have it as a female voice, it makes it even worse because we're yelling at this poor woman. but it's frustrating that, you know, and this is just an example of, if once we use that data, we're not only creating more bias, but we're doing it very quickly as well, because AI can calculate very quickly and pulls in more and more data. And if you don't fix it, then, you know, and gender bias is just one example. Yes, it's more familiar to me, so I'm going to use that as an example. But racial inequities are there too. You know, the Black women who are 3 or 4 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related issue than white women. There's you know, problems with facial recognition software for Black females over I think it's 35% error rates for Black females versus 1% for white men. And a lot of that is based on the data that we're training. Now,
Caroline, do you think the solution might be taking some relevant data that's proven for women, let's say in this case, and create synthetic data to try to balance the inequity? Are you seeing some of that?
Yeah, so that's part of it. So yeah, synthetic data injection is what you can do, so you balance it out. But the problem is, this is another one of those philosophical debates that I will get into, is when is it right? Like and I always think it's funny too, with you know, if you go back to the Turing test of that was when AI was invented, Alan Turing. And, you know, the test then, I think we've gone beyond that now, but a test was that you couldn't tell whether it was a human or a person. I mean, a human and a machine. So that was the Turing test. And now I think we want to make the machines better than the humans. Like, I think what we're trying to do is make them unbiased. Everyone has bias. It's just from, you know, the way that you grew up, where you are, your environment, everything. Everyone has has different biases. But what we're trying to do is hold machines to a different standard. But we're creating those standards based on the output of the flawed humans. So then you have to come back to how do you correct it and what is correct? Because certain things like we're talking about in healthcare, absolutely, you need to get rid of these just fallacies in terms of, Black patients not being prescribed as much pain medication in an ER as white. Like, there's no reason for that. There's no difference in pain
I've
tolerance.
read about
And
those situations.
yeah,
That's literally insane.
yeah, absolutely. So things like that, you could try to use synthetic data to rebalance. But
Right.
are there cases like with the crash test dummies or with there's even medical trials that they didn't include women. For a long time, they didn't use women at all in a bunch of medical trials, but there were medical
Right.
trials that they excluded women from because of their hormonal fluctuations during the month would have been too
Right.
complex for them to then actually try to figure out what was going on for the thing that they were actually looking at. Well, that's fine if you want to start there, but we're still taking the medication. Is it going to work? Is it, and there were some with like health with some statins for heart disease where it actually would have worked better for women, and they decided not to go ahead with the drug because it didn't work for men because there was only men in the trial. And then later on, they found out actually it would have worked for women. So there's just all these things where there are differences. So how do we know when it's different versus it's a bias?
Right.
So that's what I struggle with. The answer to some degree is synthetic data, but how and where do you apply it? And how do you know it's right? So
One,
those are the things that keep me awake.
in the whole AI space, whether it's ethics, data privacy, or anything else, is there one issue that keeps you up at night? One issue that is like your hobby or your passion that says, "This is what concerns me the most"?
I mean, it really is just around the training of data, using the data that we're training on and
Yeah,
making sure that
the
it's
quality of the
going
data,
to,
and we've had other people
yeah,
on this show that talked about that exact topic, the quality of the data that just like we've been doing
yeah,
in IT for 100 years. Well, not 100 years,
yeah.
but,
And
50 years.
I used to run QA for a while, so I'm
There you go.
well aware of garbage in, garbage out. I think
Yeah.
the other thing too is just um, gender parity within the profession itself. I wrote a
Oh,
LinkedIn
good
article
point.
about the fact that, technology itself, women in technology is already less. There's already like, it's depending on where you look, like 35%-ish. And that drops to more like 22 for AI and even lower for women in AI leadership. If women don't have, if women are missing from the room, then they're missing from the design, they're missing from the code, they're missing from, so it's, we've got to make sure that and I had someone comment on my LinkedIn post that said, we don't need like not every forum or whatever it was, demographics need to be equal. I'm like, no, in some cases I agree. Sure, in some cases they don't have to be, but in this one they do. Like this one, we need to make sure that that there are, and it's again not just women, but all marginalized and include marginalized voices and women and any other. We
Right.
need representation because, especially in healthcare, to bring it back to that, the majority of healthcare decisions are made by women. So we need to make sure that women are included in the designs for systems and the data that supports them.
I love
That
that.
makes sense.
I like that. I want to end on that note. I think it's so important. I really do.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode. As always, if you have suggestions for guests or for topics that you would like to see covered or potential guests that you would like us to have on, feel free to email us at digitaldilemmas@lenk.media, and we will take your suggestions into account moving forward. Thank you so much.
All right, Digital Dilemma fans. That wraps up another episode. Thanks for tuning in and navigating our tech world with us.
Please rate us and leave a review. And if you enjoyed it, tune in next time. We'd also love it if you would send us any questions or suggest guests via email. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast.